let's get comfortable. Well, first of all, thanks Salma, and thank you all for joining us here on these kind of these little nervous perches that we've got on these. We'll try not to sway. I was told earlier on not to sway, and I did it immediately, so I'm breaking the rules right away. Salma gave us a little introduction, and I was about to introduce you all again, but I think I'll let you each do that. I know that we heard from Chris earlier on, but since we might be watching, people might be watching this recorded later on and might not have had the benefit of that, we'll give everyone a chance to say hello. So why don't we go down the line? It'd be nice to know who you are, where you work, and also just the kind of exposure you've had to headless commerce and composable architecture. So. Nicholas, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Nicolas Lepalec. I'm Executive Technology Director for EKQA, which is an agency. And we work for many clients, lots of luxury, but not only. And we do lots of digital experiences for clients. That can be website, that can be mobile application, that could be retail experiences, and e-commerce, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have invited you. No. Absolutely. Thanks, thanks, Nicholas. Iris, over to you.
Thanks, Phil. So I'm Iris Schiefer, Enterprise Technology Partnerships Lead at BigCommerce EMEA. You heard a little bit about BigCommerce from Steve just now, but to set the wider context, we are popular in the composable space because of our API-first architecture. But what sets us apart in the space is that we complement that mature suite of APIs with a robust set of out-of-the-box features and functionality. So you don't have to be completely dependent on third-party technologies to use BigCommerce successfully. So in terms of the types of projects that we're seeing a lot more companies take that sort of iterative approach to re-platforming. So launching quickly with that mix of out-the-box and best of breed, maybe a proof of concept or just a couple of different sites, test and learn, and then seamlessly turn those features off and start adding new technologies as and when it suits the needs of the business.
Awesome. I have a feeling we might return to some of these themes later as we start talking. But let's also hear from Chris at the end a couple of comments, please, Chris. Yes. A reminder of who you are, where you work.
I'm Chris Bach, I'm the co-founder and CCO and CSO of Netlify, which is a platform for modern web development.
Nice. So we have a bit of a variety here. So we've got Chris, who's working at Netlify as this kind of glue layer. Iris, who works in this area where it's really providing that capabilities for the commerce layer, if you like, through BigCommerce, and Nicholas working with clients to actually do the execution to make these things come to life. So hopefully, that means that we have a number of different perspectives and angles in here. So I'm tempted to get straight into the meat of it and ask why do it. So I think it would be interesting to hear perhaps just some opinions on motivations for leaning into this type of architecture and starting to use these different types of services. Let's start with Iris first, if I may. What are some of the main motivations for embracing this kind of technology?
Yeah, I think one of the key drivers for composable commerce is in the name itself, namely the composable aspect and sort of the flexibility and the freedom of choice that businesses gain as a result of that. So I would say two common scenarios for us where we see companies wanting to move to that approach is if they're on a legacy or a suite style platform and there's certain features of that platform that aren't meeting their requirements and they're struggling to take out those specific features and sort of like replace or customize those. Or they've built out a completely custom setup. They want to start using these best of breed technologies, but the cost and effort of building those custom integrations doesn't make it feasible to do so. And typically the drivers that we'll see for companies wanting to shift into that model is that they're looking to expand into new markets, that they're looking to open up new segments or new sales channels, or that they're looking to streamline operations for the business, or in fact, a combination of all of those. And I think that is where this composable architecture really comes into its own and comes into play. It's, as you mentioned, Chris, in your opening keynote, creating those hyper-customized, channel-specific experiences, improving the speed of the site, but also speed to market, and also being able to adapt really quickly in response to changes in the market and also changes within the business itself.
Yeah, quite. I'm trying not to start chipping in with the conversation too much myself, but you say speed to market, and that's kind of a triggering thing for me because, like you, Nicholas, I had a bit of a background in agency, so that resonates particularly with me. How about you? Does what you're hearing from Iris kind of tally with the motivations that you've seen and you've experienced for kind of leaning towards a composable architecture?
Yes, I think definitely one. There's two parts for me. There's one which is, back to your point, which is for a lot of our clients, it's reacting to a lot of frustration. We've been in this monolith environment for many, many years. We know it all very, very well, and we know all the downside. And our clients have been suffering for it for so long. Time to market is one, like the time it takes for marketing to actually get a feature out is just too much. It actually creates a lot of friction internally in those companies, right? It's not just a problem to address your customers, it's also internally, it makes it very difficult. So that's one part, and those are very large customers which are already online and they want to change. It will take some time, but they want to take that route. The other one, which we think more and more, and I think it's also response to the 2 years we've had, it's clients that were relying a lot of distribution. They were distributed clients. They were selling their product in distributed stores or on Amazon, and they realized that if they really want to get a relationship with a consumer, they need to go D2C, direct to consumer. And to do that, they're going straight away into headless Mac architecture, and they're right. It's amazing. They don't have to suffer from all the legacy system that we've all suffered from. They're like, okay, this seems right. They have new, nimble, young, agile team that can understand it, and I'll talk about it later, but we can start releasing amazing experiences super fast, that which is not possible. So it's really two things. I think big clients are transforming, reacting to frustration from monoliths, and new type of clients are jumping into D2C and creating.
Yeah. And Chris, are you kind of also seeing people trying to address frustrations in the past that they're like saying, okay, well, we need to do away with the old and in with the new, and that's something that's bringing people to things like Netlify and composable kind of architectures also?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are very real pain points in existing legacy solutions that are being solved by the composable approach, right? And I think, you all just mentioned them around like time to market and around, the flexibility and of course, site conversion speeds and everything else. I mean, there's just so many things to gain from it. So yeah, I absolutely see that people are moving from a legacy past to solve a lot of issues that are quite present.
And how about making the case for this? Because it's one thing for us to kind of see this as an opportunity and say, okay, there's a different architecture that maybe hasn't been either popular in the past or is emerging as a new way of approaching this, and having the emergencies of all of these different services and tools that we can now kind of compose together into our kind of new stack, if you like. But I feel like not everyone in an organization is as ready to accept that at the same time as others. And so I'm interested, that we're talking about the business case for this, but really just I'm curious about how do we change the hearts and minds of people who might be resistant to that? Or maybe I'm jumping the gun. Are we seeing resistance to that? Nico, are you seeing resistance for adopting this approach from either clients or maybe the team? Oh, the arms are folded, everyone. Brace yourself.
This is my life.
Is that something you're seeing with clients or indeed within the teams themselves that execute on projects?
And I think, we're in this curve. I mean, the fact that there's this summit is because there need to be this summit, right? It's not done. You're talking about the change from headless to composable. We're on a journey. And here we are probably the people which, are the most open to this. But maybe in the industry, it's about 25% for real. There are still massive clients which rely on monoliths. And actually, the biggest break to moving to this type of architecture is the relationship between the IT team at our clients and massive monolith vendors. This relationship has been going for years. They're very embedded. And as you were saying, those big vendors, they have sales powers which are absolutely amazing. Even though they are saying we should move composable and headless, and that's true. They release papers on this saying this is the future.
Exactly.
The reality is they probably need to keep the contract they have with the customer as it is for a couple of years before they find out how to make it an advantage. So we have to fight this, and we have to fight the right reason to make them move, because at this point, this is cultural. When you spend more than 10 years with a vendor discussing technology, it becomes you, it becomes part of what you believe. So it's not just rational, which we change that. It needs a lot more. And I believe the best example is doing POCs and actually creating products. And you need to start small, you need to reassure everybody, and that's the way, right? However, I'm saying this again, for big clients, small, nimble clients which are moving to D2C, it's probably much easier.
Yeah, demonstrating is so powerful. You know, actually seeing a result is super powerful. Iris, how about your own experiences there in terms of making the case for someone employing kind of your company, your services, and this kind of architecture? Does that tally with Nico's experiences there also?
Yeah, I think it definitely does tally. I think for me, Composable is all about working backwards. So I would always encourage, before starting to look at vendors and sort of looking at the performance improvements that they can give you, take a step back and take a holistic view of the business outcomes and the growth goals of the business. What are the gaps from an operational perspective, but what are the gaps in terms of the experience that you're providing to the end consumer? So making sure that you're gathering inputs from all the stakeholders within the business. And as Nicholas already touched on, there can be some resistance within the business because of that long-term relationship with vendors, and also very legitimate concerns in, for example, managing multiple different contracts with different vendors, sort of like having different points of customer success, different service level agreements. So, making sure everybody in the business is comfortable with that. Obviously, in terms of ROI, we're factoring in subscription costs, service costs, implementation costs, but also when making the business case, make sure that you're taking into account all potential incremental sources of revenue. So, for example, what is the total addressable market if you were looking to open up a new channel? For example, if you're B2B moving to opening up a D2C channel, if you were to increase your mobile conversion from 1.5% to 2.5%, what does that mean in terms of the revenue impact to the business? So, making sure you're taking all those factors into account.
Yeah, and are there other? I'm almost loath to ask the question, but are there other common points of resistance, common pushbacks that we get when we're suggesting a shift to this? Chris, have you got those?
Yeah, there's different ones. Against a composable, it's one of the things you do here if you embrace this at scale is you take a lot of operation and turn it into code. Right? That's what we see a lot of at Netlify, right? And so if you have very large clients, they're saying, well, we have 150 people doing operations, right? And they can feel a little sort of, does that mean I'm out of a job, right? And of course, the reality is, no, you get to spend less time on maintenance and more time on building, right? But I think there's definitely some fun that needs to be addressed there. They can also feel sometimes like, well, in the old world, I needed completely granular control of all my varnish caching and caching headers and Akamai roles and so on, right? And the reality is that in this world, a lot of that just works by default, right? Because it's, if it's pre-generated and distributed globally, right, then it already has an incredibly high cache validation, and so you don't actually need to go out and do these things, right? And so that requires education, right? And then there's, as I talked about earlier, this it can be daunting, right? I often sit with someone that says, well, we spent 10 years on Sitecore or something like that, right? And I just I don't even have an overview of how many million lines of codes and integrations and stuff. I mean, it feels like this layered thing. Can I ever get out from underneath it, right? I mean, like there's and that's where the gradual migration approach that you also talked about, like this, hey, you don't have to re-platform everything at once, right? You take on your hat of like what channels will give the best return on investment, where should I be investing first, right? And you slice out a technical project that matches that, right? And then you have then you look at, well, what does success have to look like here, and you actually can build it out. And that also means that, that isn't a huge replatforming exercise, because you don't have to cater a lot of different needs. You sort of have to just cater the needs of that corner of the project, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to ask questions about shifting to new architectures in a moment.
I was just going to touch on that actually, and I think one of the common pushbacks we get is kind of this the sort of sunk cost fallacy of exactly what you just mentioned. They've already invested so much in the current architecture that they don't want to they don't know where to start in terms of replacing it. So I think what I would encourage for anybody kind of putting together this ROI and analysis is also think about the cost of doing nothing.
Exactly.
How is it going to impact ROI or inhibit consumer experiences in the future? Even if you feel it's not the right fit now, there really has to be an element of future thinking when it comes to making these assessments.
I think that's a beautiful point. I think that's spot on, the cost of doing nothing. First of all, as I also mentioned earlier, like in the keynote, there are actually great costs associated with just upgrading versions of legacy software, right? Like that's huge part of your budgets. And then what does it actually cost you to not maximize conversions, right? Especially when it comes to online commerce, where the market is so transparent that margins becomes razor thin. So you have to tweak everything you can, and it's all the volume game, right? And so if you're not optimizing those few extra % of conversion rate, that might actually put you in a hole, right? Rather than being a flourishing business. So yeah, absolutely, great point.
Yeah, and I think potentially there are different pushbacks that come when you're working with clients from the agency point of view, where it's not always. Sometimes it's a new project. Sometimes it's greenfield. Seldom. But so I imagine there are some parallels there. But Nicholas, have you found there are particular points of like friction or pushback that you've had to overcome in order? I know we'll be hearing later on from yourself, and you'll be talking about a project with Sennheiser. But I imagine there are many that are now starting to move over from a traditional kind of monolithic stack to the kind of architecture we're talking about. I'm always keen to hear about pushbacks and how they're overcome by agency world.
Yeah, I think for clients with existing technology, there's always this pushback on, okay, anything new is dangerous. So we should use this, we should use that, and the reason sometimes their security is such a process. To me, in the end, the reason is just like, it's about, we don't want to change anything. It's in our culture, and this is something which is hard to change. However, the response to this is we have an amazing opportunity. I think, I've been in this industry for a very long time. We've all suffered so much about replatforming. Just this word. Replatforming probably means something which was planned for 12 months, which is discussed at 18 months, get released at 24 months. By this time, you've probably lost about 30% of your team. You have a couple of breakdowns. You have a change of 1 or 2 vendors. And when the things get released, it's got 3 times what it was, and nobody's excited anymore about it. Like, never again. That's one of the things that I get the most excited about Composable. Never again. Replatforming, I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't want that for any of my clients. But this is a solution ever to replatform. As you were saying, with Composable, it's made to plug onto monoliths. You can do it. For me, I really believe in the 3 months. What can we do in 3 months? Just you go to a client, give us 3 months. 3 months, 300K, we'll do something. And then we'll move on, right? And that's so important. So it's not that much commitment to the client. You reduce the time, you reduce the investment. At the end of the 3 months, you assess, and you move forward. So far, I believe it's the easiest way and the most reassuring way to get here.
I mean, maybe the world has moved on since my agency days, but hearing someone say, 3 months and we'll start seeing something, it's like, oh, that gives me tingles. Yeah, it's not what I would have expected.
It still gives me tingles.
Yeah. So let's say we've got through our 3 months and we've built some sort of a proof of concept, and we have convinced a client or a customer that we are going to make a larger move now. We are going to migrate somehow. What does that look like? You just said the phrase "never again" for the replatforming. But if we are going to migrate an architecture, what does that look like? Iris, have you got some experience there?
Yeah, I think we've already kind of touched on this in terms of that progressive approach. And anybody who's been in the Mac space for a while will probably have come across the phrase "starve, not strangle." Essentially, like taking that, building out different pieces of the functionality or different parts of the tech stack at different times in the project instead of a full rip and replace. So there's going to be an overlap between developing and deploying the new services and completely deprecating the old ones. And you can also, a common approach that we see is sort of testing that in new markets or maybe just a couple of different sites, and then gathering that data, and then before you roll it out to the wider business. So I would say that obviously there's still a place for kind of full rip and replace. I'm not sure if I'm sort of a big fan of the word starve as such, especially not just before the snack break. I prefer the term progressive replatforming. But if you are considering this kind of approach, this is probably a good point to consider an orchestration platform also as part of that stack in terms of eliminating any data silos, which makes that testing process so much easier, and also kind of providing that consistent UX to connect all those pieces of functionality. But that is where the microservices element of Muck really comes into play, that you have all these different pieces of functionality, but you have that connection between the API endpoints to seamlessly connect the journey together.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm conscious that maybe this is me just using this panel as a bit of therapy for me by saying, let's talk about the challenges. But why don't we spend the last few minutes just talking about some of the results and the successes? Because presumably we've been through this and we've had some outcomes. So why don't we go down the line and just talk a little bit about some of the benefits we've seen as a result of moving to this kind of architecture? Nicholas, should we start with you?
Sure. I'll talk about some success later, so I won't disclose everything now.
Okay.
You guys need to come back after
Teaser.
the break.
Okay, fine.
But some of the things that I get very excited about, and we all want to work in happier places, right? So first, yes, it makes developers happy. Thank you, your platform. Mac make developers happy, but also, we don't talk about this enough, but at the client side, it makes IT and marketing finally be happy with each other. I mean, and we don't talk about this enough, but there have been a war going on for like 30 years, and those people did not understand each other. They were fighting on the same terrain. This is solving this. So I won't go into too much of the business side. I'll talk about it later. But for me, that is a massive success that we should celebrate more. Happier team and happier client and organization in-house.
Nice. Iris, anything to add to that?
I would say, again, typically, I really liked your point between sort of bringing IT and marketing together. And again, we touched earlier on gaining consensus across all stakeholders involved in that decision. I think that is also a factor that needs to be really important when it comes to choosing technologies, especially like e-commerce platforms, CMSs, PIMs, making sure that you have technologies that meet the needs of both sides of the business. So UX really is important there, ease of use, and making sure that you can utilize those parts of the platform.
Absolutely. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was talking about it in the keynote as well, like this idea that the largest challenge for marketers often is time to market, right? And that's really where that battle between marketing and ID comes in, right? Because a lot of people think, well, if you're setting it off for implementation, maybe you should have your own developers. And it's not the question of marketing sending off a Photoshop file, right? No, there are developers, right? And there are agencies working with it, right? And they are more or less finished sites, but they need to be implemented, right? And then if you have this huge operations and tons of DevOps and all these different teams, infrastructure teams, DevOps teams with their own sources of truth, that's where that huge overhead comes in, right? And that's where you feel like a marketer, well, I'm handing this off for implementation and hopefully I'll get it back at some point, right? It's really hard to work around it, plan around it, and I think the empowerment of developer is actually what leads to the empowerment of the marketer. But now, no, you have your own cycle so you can push directly, right? And you don't have to go and stand in line in these, either in outside consultancies or inside your own organizations, right? In operations, right? And I think that's the huge enabler, right? And so that's also what drives a lot of the return on investment, like just the fact that you can iterate so much faster.
Yeah, enablement and familiarity are really interesting to me. The fact that through the course of today we've already seen a number of architectural diagrams up on the slides, and they're different. They're serving different purposes. They're products that are servicing different needs. The user experience is different. The development experience is different. And yet within that, I'm starting to see squares on those diagrams that are, oh yeah, I know that piece.
Yeah.
And so knowing that we've got kind of portable skills from the developers using those things and familiarity that's bred through that, even though the places they might be deployed are radically different, I think is really exciting and really interesting to me. We are, the lights are flashing at it, which
it is quite aggressive.
Means that we are out of time. So thank you all ever so much for sharing your thoughts on the stage here. I think your appreciation, please, for Nicholas Le Pallec, Iris Schiffer, and Chris Back.